Okay, today we're going to read the first chapter of 101 Dalmatians. My story begins in London not so very long ago, yet so much has happened since then it seems like an eternity. At the time, I lived with my pet in a bachelor flat, just off Regent's Park. It was a beautiful spring day, a boring time for bachelors. As usual, my pet preferred to stay indoors and work at his piano, for he was a musician of sorts. Roger Radcliffe hadn't sold a single song yet, but I still had hope for the old boy. I'd been living with Roger for a while. As far as I could see, the old notion that a bachelor's life was so much fun was all nonsense. It was downright dull. My pet needed someone, but if it were left to Roger, we'd be bachelors forever. He was married to his work, and he spent all his time writing songs about love, a subject he knew nothing about. Roger is smart enough as humans go. As for looks, it's true that he doesn't have a smooth coat and spots, as I do. Yet I'd been comparing him to people I saw on television, and it seemed to me that Roger was a rather handsome animal in his way. Certainly any dog would be proud to have his strong jaw and nose, and to be so tall and thin. I could see no reason why my pet didn't deserve an attractive wife, and I was determined to do my best to help him. Of course, a dog is a pretty poor judgment of human beauty, but I'd seen enough fashion magazines to give me a rough idea. While Roger tootled away at the piano, I rested my head on the windowsill, watching the passer-byers below. I kept an eye out for 4 legs and 2, that is, for a dog and its pet. On this particular spring day, I saw an Afghan hound slink down the sidewalk. Her pet had long, stringy hair and a proud nose, and stepped right behind her. What a strange pair! Definitely not for me and Roger. Then I saw a rather short lady and her pug waddle by. Nope, I knew that wasn't right. Aha, I said to myself. I spied a French poodle and her pet. Now they are a fancy breed. I looked again and saw both their noses pointed in the air. Perhaps they were just a bit too fancy. A plump woman rode by on her bike with a Pekingese propped in the basket. They were too old. And the next pair, a girl and her puppy, too young. I settled my head back on the windowsill. My eyes were just about to close, and I saw her. The most beautiful creature on 4 legs. She had a straight pointed tail and the most magnificent spots. I was afraid to look at her pet lest I be disappointed. I wasn't. The woman behind her was just as lovely. It was almost too good to be true. I know I'd never find a pair like them if I looked in 100 years. I saw them headed towards the park, the perfect meeting place. Somehow, I would have to get Roger out of the house. It would be difficult because he never stopped work until 5. I moved quickly yet quietly, although Roger's back was to me. I tiptoed behind him. I went up the clock and very carefully moved one hand forward with my nose. Then I grabbed my leash in my mouth and I ran to the front door. My barking surprised him. "It's too early for your walk, Pongo," he called to me from his seat at the piano. I jumped up on my hind legs and front paws against the door and barked even louder. From where I stood, I could see Roger check his watch, then look at the clock. "Oh, after 5 already," he said. "Fancy that." Poor man, he thought his watch had stopped. I scratched at the door and barked again, hoping to hurry him. "All right, Pongo," he said. "All right, boy. We'll go to the park." I wagged my tail furiously. As soon as Roger opened the door, I yanked him out of the flat and down the sidewalk. He pulled on my leash, saying, "Pongo, old boy, take it easy. What's the rush?" At the park, I hurried him past the fat lady and her pug. I made sure he didn't look at that creature with the Afghan. But as I dragged him down one path after another, I began to be afraid that we'd missed the lovely pair. Then I spotted them. The woman sitting on a bench reading a book. Her Dalmatian sat beside her. I gazed up at Roger, who was looking the other way. At Roger. He would settle down on the grass and puff his pipe, and that would be that. So I marched Roger right past the woman and her dog, both of whom lifted their eyes to look at us for a second. Then Roger did just as I feared. He sat on the grass beside the pond, staring off into the distance. I was desperate. I needed to think of something, anything to attract attention. I jumped on Roger's back and snatched the hat off his head. "Pongo!" he cried, trying to grab the hat. "You silly old thing! Come on, let me have my hat back." I didn't care how angry Roger became. I had to do something. I bounded over to the bench and set the hat on it. The woman looked up from her book, glancing at Roger. For a moment, I thought my plan had worked. At least they had seen one another. I turned to grin at Roger, then looked back at the bench. For some strange reason, the pair had left. At that moment, Roger grabbed me by the collar as he snapped on my leash. He said, "Come on, you old rebel. We're going home." I refused to give up. With Roger tugging on my leash, I ran down the path after the woman. As soon as we caught up, I wrapped my leash around her legs and then around her and Roger, pulling them in together. "I beg your pardon," cried Roger, trying to maintain his balance and tip his hat at the same time. "I'm so sorry, miss. Please excuse me. Well, I must say," replied the woman, attempting to untangle herself. "What on earth?" As they stumbled about, joined at the knees by my leash, they headed closer to the pond. The beautiful Dalmatian grabbed her pet's jacket in her teeth, but the cloth ripped and the woman tumbled into the water. Roger fell in after her. At that point, he let go of my leash. When the woman sat up, she didn't look too pleased. Water streamed down her face as she exclaimed, "Just look at my new spring suit! And where's my new hat?" Afraid of what I had done, I jumped in and grabbed her hat out of the water. I waited patiently as Roger helped her up, but I could tell that he was quite cross with me. Roger snatched the hat out of my mouth and handed it to the woman. "I'm terribly sorry," he said to her. "I don't know what's come over him. He's never acted this way before." Never mind," she said, sniffling. "Please, just go away. You've done enough." I looked up at Roger, hoping that he would say something